Number 9. Harold Olinger. During what was supposed to be an uneventful shopping trip with a friend in December 2019, an Ohio man named Brandon Lucas ended up having a gun pointed in his face by an elderly man with road rage. The ordeal began when Lucas and his friend were waiting to turn out of a shopping plaza in the city of Ravenna. When the car in front of them didn't move for an unusually long time, Lucas's friend beeped his horn at the driver. Then, just moments later, 69-year-old Harold Olinger exited his vehicle with a gun in his hand and pointed it directly at Lucas and his buddy. A woman also got out of Oblinger's car and yelled at the victims. Lucas later told local station Cleveland 19 that he knew the situation was about to get ugly, which was why he pulled out his phone and began recording the enraged fellow motorist. He said that the incident left him shaken to his core and that he doesn't believe that someone so hot-headed should be allowed to have a permit to carry a gun. And based on Oblinger's behavior in the video Lucas captured, it's hard to disagree. At one point during the video, Olinger appeared to flash some sort of badge, but it's unclear what it was supposed to represent. Then, after seeing the footage, police arrested the senior citizen at his home on suspicion of aggravated menacing. Number 8. Mariana Silva. When 20-year-old Mariana Silva was accused of illegally passing a Greyhound bus and sideswiping another vehicle in Washington, D.C. one afternoon in 2018, she decided against doing the right thing and owning up to her mistake. Instead, she grabbed her car jack and embarked on a campaign of violence. The bus driver confronted Silva, who allegedly responded by hitting the bus repeatedly with the jack and smashing the windows as the driver called 911. Portions of the shocking incident were captured on video, including the moment when the suspect tried leaving the scene. The driver attempted to stand in her way, but she managed to get past him and took off in her car. Police soon caught up with Silva and charged her with assault with a dangerous weapon. Her defense lawyer claimed that she was mentally ill, and the prosecutor accused the woman's family of letting her drive after going weeks without her medication. Silva's uncle Seth told NBC Washington that he'd never seen his niece behave so erratically. He said that he was stunned by the display, but acknowledged that Silva had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the past. She was crying and appeared remorseful in court, but a judge nevertheless ordered her to be held without bond while the case played out. Number 7. Dustin Dale Young. On what began as a normal Sunday evening in Nicholas County, West Virginia, in October 2023, emergency responders were called to the scene of a single vehicle accident along a state highway. According to police, the car involved in the crash was being driven by 24-year-old Dustin Dale Young. And after getting into the wreck, Young allegedly overpowered a Good Samaritan who'd stopped to check on him. He stole the individual's car, then drove to a woman's house and attacked her with a hammer. The woman was reportedly rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries while Young took off in the stolen car and crashed into another vehicle, trapping the other driver in his automobile. While a Somersville police officer tried to help the man, Young allegedly stole his patrol vehicle. A multi-agency chase ensued, but the suspect was eventually stopped and taken into custody. The car crash victim, identified as a local firefighter named Brody Hanna, unfortunately died from his injuries. Young now faces a litany of charges in connection with the crime spree, including attempted murder, driving under the influence causing death, assault, burglary, 2 counts of grand larceny, and fleeing with reckless indifference. He's currently being held in custody, but the investigation is ongoing. Number 6. Derek Jones. A 350-pound Texas man named Derek Jones made headlines twice in 2023 for allegedly going on destructive rampages and attacking staff members at United Regional Hospital in Wichita Falls. The first incident happened in February when Jones was accused of breaking things in his room while refusing treatment. When employees realized that Jones had been banned from the hospital the previous month for another disruptive incident, they tried to kick him out, but according to a police report, Jones refused to leave and became combative while staff members and cops struggled to subdue him. The local jail refused to book Jones into custody when he failed a medical screening, and he was sent back to the hospital. Law enforcement was called to the scene for a second time later that night when Jones allegedly ripped an oxygen regulator out of the wall, causing oxygen to spew into the room. Operations were suspended throughout the entire emergency department until employees got the leak under control. Police were summoned to the hospital for yet another incident involving Jones 3 months later, in late May. According to security guards, Jones tossed garbage into the hallway and threw items at nurses. He was also accused of chucking his cell phone at a security guard, striking him in the leg. Then, when a police officer tried taking Jones into custody, he allegedly yanked his arm out of the cop's grasp and began swinging. It took several hospital employees and members of law enforcement to subdue Jones, and he continued to resist even after being handcuffed. At the time, he was wanted on warrants stemming from the incident that had occurred months later. Jones was taken into custody to face his outstanding charges, which included 1 count of assaulting a public servant, resisting arrest, and criminal mischief. But his reasons for throwing the alleged tantrums remain unclear. Number 5. Mark Edward Tittle. An Ohio man who moved to Oxford Oaks, Florida in September 2023 got off on the wrong foot in his new community after he allegedly went on a domestic rampage during the early morning hours one day. 40-year-old Mark Edward Tittle allegedly attacked the mother of his kids in a drunken rage, causing her to flee the home in her vehicle. According to an arrest report, Tittle called the woman and demanded that she return home while complaining that their child had pooped their pants. When the victim returned to the residence, Tittle allegedly yanked her out of the car, threw her down onto their living room sofa, struck her with his fists, and held her down with his full weight, putting his knee on her chest. The woman later told police that she managed to break free after biting Tittle's arm hard enough to draw blood. According to the report, she spoke in a hushed tone during her phone call to 911 because she was afraid that Tittle would overhear her and realized that she'd called law enforcement. In the end, Tittle was arrested on suspicion of misdemeanor battery and 1 felony count of neglect. He was released after posting a $4,000 bond and is free pending the outcome of the case, which is concerning to say the least, given the fact that he has a child. Number 4. Delce Rodriguez Martinez. In August 2023, police in Coral Springs, Florida, arrived at the scene of a domestic violence call to find a man suffering from visible injuries. He told responding officers that he was in his bedroom with a female visitor when his ex-wife, 43-year-old Delce Rodriguez Martinez, barged into the house and broke down the bedroom door. According to a police report, the victim's lady friend hid in the bathroom while Martinez smashed a beer bottle against the back of her ex-husband's head, causing serious injuries. The violence continued as the struggle between the victim and his attacker spilled over into the living room of the home, where Martinez allegedly got a hold of a hammer and destroyed her ex's TV, a dining room table, and a mirror. She apparently got so out of control that she ended up hurting herself, causing injuries that required stitches. Martinez reportedly admitted to investigators that she entered the home uninvited by climbing through a window. She claimed that she went there to retrieve some of her belongings and blamed her ex-husband for the damages to the property. But when asked about how she got her injuries, Martinez said she didn't know. She was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, burglary with assault or battery, and criminal mischief resulting in at least $1,000 worth of damage. Number 3. Dustin Shelton. In September 2023, a 49-year-old Oklahoma man named Dustin Shelton was accused of going on a vandalism rampage in the city of Enid. It began during the late afternoon at a local pub called Callahan's, where Shelton allegedly started acting unruly and overturning chairs. Employees called 911, but by the time police arrived, Shelton had left the bar and was being accused of attacking a sign at a nearby clothing store. The store's owner, Tanny Mahaffey, later told the Enid News and Eagle that she was alerted to the situation when she overheard yelling from outside. She said that Shelton attacked her store sign twice before throwing a flower pot at the window of a nearby business, causing the glass to shatter. Tanny dialed 911 while bystanders pinned Shelton to the ground and held him there until police arrived. Laffy Coldwater, who owns the business where Satterley broke a window, was the first person to tackle the unruly man. He told the Enid News and Eagle that he charged at the suspect when he realized that Satterley was picking up anything he could get his hands on and throwing the items at the windows of his store. A supplier who was delivering product to the business helped Coldwater hold Satterley down. The suspect allegedly remained combative toward police, who struggled to handcuff him and take him into custody. According to law enforcement, Satterley allegedly tried to grab an officer's gun. Thankfully, though, the police managed to subdue him without anyone being seriously injured. Satterley is currently facing charges of assault and battery on a police officer, resisting arrest and vandalism. But since this case is so recent, we'll have to wait and see how things play out in court. Number 2. Iron Byers. The city of Mesa, Arizona and nearby Phoenix were rocked by unprovoked violence in May of 2023 when a crazed gunman fatally shot 4 people and seriously injured a 5th victim over a several-hour period. According to court documents, the killing spree began in the middle of the afternoon when 20-year-old Iron Byers opened fire on 41-year-old Nicholas Arnstad, who was using drugs in public. But by the time police arrived, Arnstad had died from his injuries and Byers had fled the scene. Later that day, Byers allegedly gunned down a 41-year-old man named Julian Cox at a park. Records later revealed that the shooting occurred shortly after the victim began talking to Byers about his drug use. The suspect then boarded the city's light rail train, where he reportedly began a conversation with fellow passenger, 41-year-old Stephen Young. According to authorities, Byers shot Young in the head while the men walked along a street together. And once again, the shots rang out shortly after the victim began talking about his drug habits. Prosecutors would later accuse Byers of killing his first 3 victims out of hatred for their fentanyl use. But he allegedly had a different motive for shooting a 40-year-old homeless man named John Swain, who took a bullet to the head while walking along a set of railroad tracks in the area. Authorities claimed that in addition to his disgust toward drug users, Byers harbored a hatred toward homeless people. He was accused of opening fire on Swain after realizing that the victim was a transient. 36-year-old Angela Fonseca became the 5th and final target of the deadly rampage shortly after midnight when she crossed paths with Byers just a half-mile away from the scene of the night's first shooting. Like all of the day's previous incidents involving Byers, what began as a polite conversation became violent when Fonseca said something that triggered the suspect's rage. Luckily, though, she survived her injuries after undergoing multiple emergency surgeries. Police eventually caught up with Byers and took him into custody on a trespassing charge. He allegedly admitted to committing all 5 shootings and even told investigators where he'd stashed the gun and the clothing he was wearing when he carried out the crimes. Authorities said that Byers was cooperative but unremorseful, telling detectives that he didn't dial 911 because he didn't think the victims deserved to be helped. In the end, he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and he's currently being held without bail pending the outcome of the case. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Luis Fernando Hernandez Laraga. What began as a normal workday for McDonald's employees in Fort Myers, Florida in August 2023 took a terrifying turn when a shirtless drunk man became impatient while waiting for his order. Later identified as a 26-year-old homeless local man named Luis Fernando Hernandez Laraga, the suspect was accused of ordering staff members to either refund him or hurry up with making his food. Workers told Laraga to leave, but he refused, and the situation only became more heated as he went behind the counter and continued to demand his money back. In surveillance footage that was later turned over to law enforcement, Laraga could be heard pleading for a refund as a staff member yelled over him and repeatedly ordered him to leave. Witnesses later told police that when employees refused to reimburse him, he lost his temper and punched an ordering screen. Laraga was also accused of retrieving a pile of rocks from outside and throwing them at the counter. He exchanged blows with staff members as they forced him outside and locked him out of the restaurant. But the suspect apparently continued his rampage as he reportedly threw a rock at the building and shattered a window before leaving the scene in a vehicle. Lee County deputies caught up with Laraga later that evening and arrested him on suspicion of criminal mischief and disorderly intoxication. And while taking him into custody, deputies noted that he seemed to be drunk and smelled of booze. According to the Lee County Sheriff's Office, Laraga has a criminal record spanning multiple states, including Texas and Missouri. But he posted bond several hours later and was released pending the outcome of his case. Number 9. Christopher Depolis. After working as an NYPD officer for 20 years, Christopher Depolis retired in 2013 after hurting his knee during a criminal chase. He was awarded a pension of $82,000 per year based on the injury. He then moved to Florida, where he was hired as a deputy for the Broward County Sheriff's Office. Depolis passed all the physical tests for the job despite his alleged disability. The position paid a salary of more than $52,000 per year in addition to his pension, which he was collecting tax-free. Several months after he landed the job, the New York Daily News called Depolis out in an article for allegedly faking his disability. In addition to passing the fitness test to become a cop, the newspaper revealed that he was also an avid long-distance marathon runner. When the story first broke, it was unclear whether Depolis had done anything illegal or if he'd cleverly exploited systematic loopholes without breaking any laws. He never told the Broward Sheriff's Office about his disability pension or knee injury, but he also wasn't specifically asked about these things, and he was honest in telling them that he retired from the NYPD. At the very least, it seemed as though Depolis had a chip on his shoulder. In a Facebook post from right after Barack Obama was elected president in 2012, he reportedly expressed his desire to milk the system for as much money as possible, since, in his post to social media, he wrote, "Everyone else is going to get free and not have to work. I plan to do the same now." After making news headlines, Depolis was let go from his position. An agency spokesperson said that he'd failed to meet the standards of his one-year probationary period, but declined to go into specifics. Number 8. Kenneth Bajador. 35-year-old Jagdesh Mangal, a businessman from Guyana, was at a bar in Georgetown one evening in 2022 when a group of men he was involved with forced him into the back seat of a car. They robbed the victim at gunpoint, taking more than $17,000, 3.6 million Guyanese dollars worth of jewelry, and they forced him to sign a note acknowledging that he owed them money. After the perpetrators let him go, Mangal reported the incident to the police. Officers reviewed surveillance footage and interviewed witnesses at the bar, including the owner, who said that she'd urged a retired officer to intervene on the situation, but he refused. Further investigation led authorities to suspect that the former cop, 55-year-old Kenneth Bajador, wasn't just at fault for doing nothing, but that he may have been directly involved in the robbery and abduction of Mangal. According to one witness, Bajador was among 4 suspects who approached Mangal and assaulted him while demanding their money. Bajador allegedly told the 3 men he was seen with to take Mangal away from the bar. Authorities charged the ex-cop and 39-year-old businessman Samir Bacchus in connection with the incident, while the 2 other suspects remain at large. In a criminal complaint, Bajador and Bacchus are accused of kidnapping Mangal with the intent to secretly confine him. Both men pleaded not guilty and are out on bond while awaiting trial. Number 7. Lee REI. From 2013 to 2017, LAPD detective Isabel Villegas had an on-and-off-again affair with her married colleague, Officer Lee REI. In early 2019, she sued the department for allegedly failing to take action after she repeatedly reported REI for horrific acts of sexual abuse. The lawsuit accused REI of assaulting Villegas. He threatened to pass her intimate photos around at the workplace if she didn't return gifts that he'd given her, and eventually, he followed through with the threat. In court documents, Villegas claimed that REI never faced any consequences for the abuse, which continued to escalate. REI was still employed with the department when Villegas filed the lawsuit, but soon afterward, he retired. Villegas also ended her 30-year career as a result of the stress caused by the ordeal. Authorities arrested REI on charges of extortion, domestic violence, and violating a restraining order. He ultimately pleaded to 1 count of misdemeanor injury of a spouse or girlfriend and was sentenced to 3 years of probation as a result. REI was also banned from owning guns and was required to attend counseling for his apparent issues. Number 6. Roberto Gutierrez. Retired Las Vegas, New Mexico police officer Roberto Gutierrez was a Trump supporter and his mailman was a Biden supporter. Over a several-week period in 2021, the two routinely argued over politics when the postal carrier dropped off the former cop's mail. The mailman eventually got sick of arguing and began to avoid Gutierrez. When he was tasked with delivering a package that required a signature, he left a slip inside Roberto's mailbox saying that he had to pick it up at the post office. It's a violation of Postal Service policy to do this without knocking to see if the recipient is home, but the mailman was apparently fed up enough with the situation to ignore the rules. During a confrontation over the undelivered package, Gutierrez punched the postal worker square in the face, causing him to fall backwards and hit his head on the bumper of his truck. The disgruntled customer then hit the mailman 2 more times, knocking him out cold. Gutierrez told the cops that he was the real victim and that the postal worker threatened him. In bodycam footage obtained by the media, a responding officer could be heard telling Gutierrez that it's unlikely he'll go to jail since he's a retired cop. But, as it turned out, the violent confrontation was captured on a neighbor's surveillance camera. The video seemed to contradict Gutierrez's claims and instead suggest that he was the aggressor. In the footage, the postal worker could be seen trying to get away from his attacker, and he didn't hit back a single time. While the local police department may have been willing to overlook certain things, the feds weren't, and Gutierrez was taken into custody on 1 count of assault on a federal officer. He's now facing up to 20 years in prison as a consequence of his actions. Number 5. Glenn Hawkman. Tragedy struck the town of Harrison, New York in 2015 when retired White Plains officer Glenn Hawkman killed 2 of his daughters and took his own life. To make matters even worse, he also fatally shot the family's 3 dogs. Hawkman's wife, Anna Marie, and his oldest daughter, Samantha, were on a weekend trip when the crime occurred. When Anna Marie couldn't reach anyone at home, she asked the boyfriend of one of her younger daughters to check on the rest of her family. He was the one who called the police to report the crime, and when officers arrived at the scene, they walked in on a sight that can only be described as unspeakable horror. Hawkman had retired just 3 weeks earlier after 22 years on the force. According to the New York Post, he deliberately cut Anna Marie and Samantha out of his pension benefits, leaving them high and dry. A family friend described the situation as a selfish final insult. Sources told the press that Hawkman and Anna Marie had considered separating, and that Anna Marie had recently filed a police report about an argument with her husband. Based on reports from the Harrison Police Department, she wanted the incident on file but wasn't interested in pressing charges and said that no abuse had occurred during the altercation. The horrific act of violence was especially shocking given Hawkman's outstanding service throughout his law enforcement career. Just a year earlier, he'd received a life-saving award for keeping an unresponsive patient alive until paramedics arrived. He also had no history of mental illness and was known around his neighborhood as a respectable family man who doted on his children. Sadly, situations like this prove that sometimes it's impossible to know what's going on inside a person's mind until it's too late. Number 4. Jerome Philipe. During the early morning hours one day in 2022, a police officer approached a vehicle that was parked near the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. It belonged to 53-year-old Jerome Philipe, a retired NYPD officer who left the force in 2018 and was living in Flint, Michigan at the time. According to the U.S. Capitol Police, Philipe allegedly flashed a fake badge that said Department of the Interpol and falsely claimed to be an investigator with the agency. He gave officers permission to search his car, where they found ballistic vests, a BB gun, and ammunition. Police charged Philipe with unlawful possession of high-capacity magazines and unregistered ammunition. In an interview with the New York Daily News, he described the charges against him as BS. Philipe didn't seem to understand what the big deal was about ammunition without a gun to use it with. He told the outlet that he stopped at the nation's capital while driving from the Bronx to North Carolina after his grandmother's funeral. When the police approached him, he was tired, and he claimed that he told them he used a fake Interpol badge for his business, but denied impersonating a special agent. Philipe made it a point to mention several times throughout the interview that he's pro-law enforcement. He speculated that he was targeted due to lingering fears from the Capitol riot in early 2021, which occurred very close to where Philipe was parked. According to the Daily News, he also claimed that he was slated to receive an award at the Presidential Service Center in Grover, North Carolina. The outlet spoke with an executive at the center who said that Philipe had called 2 times in recent months, expressing an interest in membership but never applied to join. The same spokesperson also clarified that there were no plans to give Philipe an award. Unfortunately, the only person who can explain the inconsistencies in the story is Philipe himself, who seems determined to stand by his belief that the cops made a mistake when they arrested him. Number 3. Michael Ritzy. Michael Ritzy was an NYPD officer for 9 years before retiring in 2000 due to an injury he incurred on the job. He was married to the daughter of a Gambino crime family member who was involved in illegal gambling, and he was arrested in 2009 for participating in a different gambling ring. But he pleaded guilty to promoting gambling, which is a misdemeanor and was only penalized with a fine. The charge was trivial compared to Ritzy's real trouble, which began in 2016 when he was accused of running a multi-million-dollar prostitution service that arranged dates between high-end escorts and wealthy clients. The business, BJM Manhattan Steaks and Entertainment, advertised its services online for anywhere between $400 and $2,000 per hour. A fleet of drivers remained on standby at all times to drive escorts to and from appointments, which typically occurred at clients' homes and in upscale hotels. The operation caught the attention of federal investigators in 2012 when they linked some of Ritzy's financial activities to another man who was operating a known prostitution business. He was consequently charged with money laundering 4 years later in 2016. Shortly after Ritzy's arrest, his lawyer, Javier Solano, told reporters that his client's company sold companionship services only and that it wasn't a prostitution business. Solano claimed that Ritzy had even fired some of his employees after discovering that they'd broken the law during their time with clients. In the end, Ritzy took a deal and pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to launder money. In the end, he was sentenced to 15 months in prison. At his sentencing, he took responsibility for his actions and admitted that he had no one to blame but himself for the legal mess that he ended up in. Number 2. Jesse Porter. After retiring from the Washington, D.C. police force in 2020, 58-year-old Jesse Porter took a job training officers who work for the district's library system, which apparently has its own force. During a demonstration on how to use expandable batons one day in 2022, Porter discharged his firearm and fatally shot 25-year-old librarian Morika Mannion. He's now facing a manslaughter charge in the ongoing case. Porter told the responding officer that he pulled his gun out of the holster while joking around with the group and taking a class picture, and that it somehow fired accidentally. There was a loud boom, and Mannion collapsed to the floor. There were reportedly several brightly colored training guns at the scene which were incapable of firing. According to responding officers, Porter repeatedly said that he thought he had his training gun, not a firearm capable of inflicting bodily harm. Surveillance footage of the incident shows Porter trying to perform CPR on Mannion. He truly appeared distraught and remorseful, based on reports from officers who reviewed the video. Sadly, Mannion died as a result of her injuries. As Porter was being escorted from the building, he looked at a library police officer and apologized for shooting the victim. Metropolitan Police Chief Robert Kanty said it was unclear why Porter had live ammunition in a training environment, but he explained that it was bad practice. He was released from custody under strict conditions as the case continues to play out, but he's required to check in weekly with pre-trial officials over the phone until a conclusion is reached. Number 1. Kevin Kanty. Kevin Kanty worked as an NYPD transit officer until 2013, when he retired early due to a disability. The following year, he shot his wife Jessica multiple times in front of their young children at their home in Queens after suspecting her of cheating on him. Unfortunately, Jessica died from her injuries. During questioning, Kanty broke down and admitted to the crime. The incident came as a shock to friends and family of the couple, who'd been together since they were teenagers. It was less surprising to neighbors, who told police that Kanty was prone to violent outbursts and frequently argued with his wife. He took a deal in court and pleaded guilty to manslaughter in exchange for a 25-year sentence. At his sentencing hearing, Kanty apologized for killing Jessica, whose sister told NBC4 that she believed his apology was sincere. In a Facebook post, a relative wrote that while the plea deal may not have satisfied everyone involved in the case, it spared Jessica's loved ones from having to endure the trauma of a trial. Would you rather have a co-worker who routinely throws unprovoked tantrums and gets away with it, or live next door to a couple that argues extremely loudly in the middle of the night on a regular basis? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.